former governor, Virginia, Jim Gilmore. Jim Gilmore, not only the former governor, he was there during 9/11 as the governor. He was also the chairman of the 9/11 Commission. And Governor Gilmore, welcome.
Glad to be with you and your listeners this morning.
Governor, I'm going to pose this. So I've been saying for an 8-year period, you're not going to depose the Assad regime, not with the military they have, with Russia as their allies, and obviously they're getting backing from Iran. No question about it. This has been going on for some time. Now, if you look at this chemical attack, which has been blamed on Assad's regime, the area of the attack, they were 95% of their military objective had been completed. There was only about a 5 to 7% resistance. The chemical attack was not against rebel troops holding out. They were fleeing. It was against Syrian citizens that were bystanders. The Assad regime has denied it. The Russians have denied it. Here's my question. Why would Assad do this? There was no military objective. It made no sense. Now we got the neocons wanting to bomb airfields after the president says, I want to get out of there. This just doesn't add up to me.
John, I think that it's time for there to be a coherent decision about American foreign policy in Syria. There's just too much contradictory stuff going on. We have to, first of all, we have to make a decision. Is this the battle that's worth fighting for? We have a tendency to get into these things and then get involved, and you can't get back out. Secretary of Defense Mattis this morning said, well, everything's on the table. The president said last week, well, no, I think maybe we need to get out. I think that we have to begin to make some political decisions in this country about what we're doing there and why we're doing it. And I think this, I don't think that this just means that we just get out. I just think that it means that we have to recognize that what's going on right now is a combination of Iran, Russia, and Syria trying to control the entire northern part of the Middle East, all the way from Iran's border, all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. And I think we have to ask serious questions about whether we ought to be permitting that or not, whether that's in the American national interest. And if we conclude that it doesn't make any difference, then we got to stop putting our chips back up on the table. Now, the first thing I would do is I would positively, absolutely get to the bottom of what happened in this gas attack. You know, there's too much confusion about this. Well, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, maybe it was somebody else. The government of the United States needs to declare what happened here. And if this is an attack on civilians, it's a terror attack. It's designed to cow the population into submission to the Assad regime and to once and for all drive away any military opposition that he's going to have. So, first things first, we got to get a message on this and find out what really happened here, and then we got to make some intelligent decisions about what American foreign policy is.
Do you agree with me, though, that I don't think we should just jump to the conclusion that it was the Assad regime, because I guess you could say that, they want to send a message, but militarily this had no objective. And they knew if they did this, it was going to invite U.S. airstrikes, a reaction from President Trump, and all sorts of, France is now talking about putting additional resources in Syria. So, if you're sitting there and you're Assad, you're President Assad, the gain you're going to get is so minimal and the reaction so big. Why would you do this? It defies logic to me.
Yeah, it depends on what Assad's goals and objectives are. I'm going to repeat this. I believe the United States can find out what happened. And then I think we need to declare what happened. If you want to use an international organization, let Nikki Haley declare it up in the Security Council and let them all argue about this. But I'm going to tell you, history is an important thing. President Obama got us into this. This is a case where he basically said you can't use chemical weapons against your own citizens. Assad did. Then Obama did nothing. Then the Russians let him off the hook by saying, well, that's okay, President Obama, we'll take care of this for you. We will just take care of all of the chemical weapon stocks out of Syria so that Assad can't do it again. It was always a fraud. It was just a fraud to let Obama off the hook. And now here's the exposure. Now it's happened again. Now, Your concern is that maybe somebody else did it and so on. And, yeah, that's the confusion in all this. I think the United States government needs to tell us once and for all who did it and why. Now, the other point that you're going to make, I think you're right about this, is, you know, Lindsey Graham this morning says, oh, well, let's just sweep the Syrian Air Force from the sky. Well, that is a big escalation. We need to make a decision about how far we're willing to go before we start doing that. Are we willing to go the whole route against the Russians? If we are, I think they'll back down. But it sounds a lot like World War I, and we got to be prepared to be all in on this if we're going to take that kind of military action, because Russians are all over the place, including their Air Force.
For what? My question, for what? For what purpose? Like, why would we even be considering this? For what purpose? Like, what would be the objective? I heard Graham. I couldn't believe my ears, because for what purpose are we bombing and sweeping their airfields out and blowing their planes out of the sky? Inviting a Russian retaliation. I mean,
John, we've got to make a positive statement that says that we're going to protect the people of Syria. That's it. And like you say, we got to make a decision. Is that what we're going to do? Is this where we're going to choose to fight for the people of Syria? You know, the amazing thing is that usually the American left wants to drive you into these things in order to, make the case that Americans stand up for humanitarian values, and indeed we do. But this is a case where the Russians have made their decision. They're going to gamble. They don't have any GDP to support a military. They don't have a decent military. But what they got, they're using in Syria in order to expand their influence into the Middle East. We got to make some important decisions about what that value is to the United States. Frankly, I don't think we're having a very intelligent discussion about this nationwide.
Oh, we're not. And,
do you?
I
don't think you do either. I don't think you think that we're actually laying our chips on the table and saying what we want to do and what we don't want to do. So we just keep stumbling around. And we just can't do that.
It's an incoherent policy because there is no policy, and because there is no authorization of military force. There's no AUMF. There's no declaration of war. And it's just, one president or the other president decides to react in a certain way. And now we've got senators talking about shooting planes out of the sky with no authorization from that, and zero U.S. strategic interest at stake. And the Russians are Assad's ally. I mean, this is the same thing I've been saying for almost a decade. I mean, Syria, we have no interest here. And so now we're going to say we're going to start a war based on protecting Syrian people, not to get gassed by somebody who we don't even know gassed them. And then where does it stop? Do we then get involved in the Yemeni civil war? I mean, we're already supplying the Saudi planes, giving them targets. We have no authorization to do that either. So what do? Just go around the globe, and every time, there's an atrocity, we bomb people? That's crazy.
Well, I think there's a case to be made for a large global strategic initiative by the United States to push back against the authoritarians in this world, the North Koreans, the Chinese, and the Russians. And we are seeing results on the North Korean crisis from the Trump policy, which is strength. The question is, does anybody believe the United States will strike North Korea based on what the president's policy is? Well, I think we will, and I think the president is being clear about that. Well, but that's part of an overall framework of a strategy that is being laid out publicly in the United States press and in our thinking. We're not seeing that in the Middle East right now. We don't really know what we're trying to do. We know this: if there's a consolidation of the Russians, the Syrians, and the Iranians across that northern tier, that is a threat to the Israelis. And they're no doubt behind the scenes making it clear that their national interests are absolutely being impinged on. So the United States, I think, is just trying to, at this point, control an ongoing explosion. And that's hard to do. Once again, if we're going to continue to play this game where we're going to keep the pot allow the pot to keep boiling over there, that's okay, but we're going to have to be prepared to deal with whatever consequences come to pass, and you got to make that case to the American people.
Governor, I agree with you there. I think a case has to be made. And, let me just play this clip because I saw it yesterday, and I have to play this because this is just crazy. I mean, look, a lot of us come from different angles here. I'm a non-interventionalist. I'm not a neocon. I don't think we have any authorization to go into these countries. We have an old AUMF. We have no declaration of war. But I'm going to play this clip from, I call him now, Crazy Lindsey. I mean, he's talking about bombing a sovereign country and shooting their planes out. This guy's a U.S. Senator on the Foreign Relations Committee. Lindsey Graham.
Just tweeting many dead, including women and children, in mindless chemical attack in Syria. President Putin, Russia, and Iran are responsible for backing animal Assad. Big price to pay. What do you think he means by that? Tom Bossert told me nothing's off the table.
Well, it's a defining moment in his presidency because he has challenged Assad in the past not to use chemical weapons. We had a one-and-done a missile attack, so Assad's at it again. They see our resolve breaking. They see our determination to stay in Syria waning, and it's no accident they use chemical weapons. But President Trump can reset the table here. To me, I would destroy Assad's air force. I would create safe zones in Syria where people can come back to their country from the surrounding area. And live a better life, train up Syrians to take on Assad so we can negotiate in Geneva from a position of strength. If it becomes a tweet without meaning, then he's hurt himself with North Korea. If he doesn't follow through and live up to that tweet, he's going to look weak in the eyes of Russia and Iran. So this is a defining moment, Mr. President. You need to follow through with that tweet, show a resolve that Obama never did to get this right.
Governor, let me just tell you, if this was a debate in Congress, this thing would get beat 2-1. You heard Senator Graham. What do you think about what he said?
I think, first of all, I think Senator Graham's very reckless, and it's a very, very dangerous thing. And by the way, it sounds like exactly the arguments that were made in Vietnam.
Exactly. I was going to say that. Yes.
Yeah, but here's the point. I believe, and I would take this position, the United States can take its firm position in North Korea and resolve that crisis across the rest of the world without being leveraged into an unwise position in the Middle East. Now, we're entitled to do that, and our adversaries will understand that we're nuanced enough to be firm in one place and then at the same time not be drawn into an unwise conflict in another. But I got to say this, we got to make an absolute decision that if we're going to follow the Lindsey Graham approach, we're making a decision to partition Syria and enforce that partition. We're going to create safe zones. Well, that means you got to have an air force over that, and that means that any attack that comes from the Russian Air Force, you got to be prepared to shoot the Russian planes down. Although I don't think that's the issue. I think the Syrian Air Force is the issue, which we in fact could sweep from the sky. But that's an absolute decision to go all in. Right now, what we're doing is we're screwing around with it. And it's very dangerous. It means you can stumble into a conflict without thinking about what you're doing. In the Korean situation, I think it's been all carefully thought through. I think we're prepared to use force. In Syria, we haven't made that decision at all, and we haven't had any national discussion about it. So I think Lindsey Graham is basically asking the United States to go to war in the Middle East all in. And I think the Congress is entitled to have some say in that.
Well, and I'm telling you, if they did, and there was an AUMF for that, and that was the plan that was outlined, there would be nowhere near 50% in Congress. Maybe the Senate, they'd get 51, but in the House, this thing would go down in flames. You know, we just cannot be policing the world. And the president, his instincts were right during the campaign, and a week ago when he said, we just need to get the hell out of there and let them figure it out. Governor, I'm out of time. I want to thank you for being with us. Governor Jim Gilmore, great to have you with us, sir. As always, thanks for that fabulous insight.
Always my pleasure, John. Pleasure to be with you.